How's it going, Bat family? Welcome back to a brand new discussion series video for the Batman 2, and this video is a bit sooner than some of you may have expected because I usually leave it a few weeks in between these installments now, since we're quite a ways out from the first film, quite a ways out from the second film, but I'm actually away by the time you are seeing this uploaded, so I thought I need some videos. I know a lot of you still really enjoy this series, so hey, why not do another installment? And a lot of today's comments, or questions if you will, or theories and everything else like that, are taken from the previous video that I did last week. There are some responses to some of the questions we got into last week, so I do recommend checking that video out just in case you missed it. So if you replied in that comment section last week, maybe your comment will be featured today. So as you all know, these videos are pretty long, so get your coffee or whatever beverage you drink and get some snacks, and let's get into this. But what you can do to help me out and help this channel grow is just by leaving a like, and if you're not actually subscribed right now, do check the red subscribe button, because that way you can be notified of any future Batman news videos, discussion series videos like this, and more. So let's start off with House Header ICMD. So they say, save Crane for a main villain. The Scarecrow is just too good and fits perfectly into Matt Reeves' interpretation of Gotham. Having Hugo Strange as a psychiatrist / psychologist and employed by Arkham is perfect. Bruce could seek out Hugo to help in capturing Scarecrow, and eventually Hugo double crosses Batman and Batman is trapped in Arkham briefly while Scarecrow is still terrorizing Gotham. Then see what the writers do to bring it all together. Maybe Crane and Hugo are in cahoots. I'd rather they not be, but Batman would eventually break out of Arkham and fight and capture Scarecrow, leaving Hugo still working at Arkham and knowing Batman is Bruce. I'd love to be a fly on that wall too, as the writers and Reeves flesh out the next script. I can't wait. Still really want to see Harvey Dent introduced. So let's start with the beginning of that. Save Crane for a main villain. The reason why I chose this comment is because it's not like exactly controversial or anything, it's just that there's quite a discussion about this, since Crane has been a villain played by Cillian Murphy in Batman Begins. He was also in the other films in minor roles, and people were thinking, should Scarecrow actually have one of those slots for what we can assume here is a trilogy? And whenever I say that, as I've said before, people get annoyed. I'm not discounting that they could do more films, but based on what we know right now, Robert Pattinson saying that he has a roadmap, a psychological roadmap for his Bruce for at least another 2 films, and all of the other points I've made in previous videos, that's why I say trilogy for now. So let's just assume it's a trilogy. Granted that we do get multiple villains in each film, assuming that's the case. For example, like the first film, Carmine Falcone, obviously the Riddler, Penguin and whatnot. There's still one poised up villain, and should Scarecrow have that slot? Now, the thing is, Cillian Murphy, his Scarecrow wasn't exactly the main villain of Batman Begins. Obviously, that was Ra's al Ghul, and I know he had a lot of screen time, but a lot of the people on the Scarecrow defense side as to why he should be such a prominent role as the main villain in one of the chapters that's coming our way, whether that's the sequel or the third installment, is because yes, we had Cillian in Batman Begins, but imagine if he was the sole and central focus and villain, unlike he wasn't, for example, in Batman Begins, because he was really just doing the League of Shadows bidding, whilst, you know, just having some fun with his fear toxin. But if you were to actually incorporate Scarecrow in, let's say, Matt Reeves' The Batman 2 or Chapter 3, Scarecrow taking the main stage, I agree with House Header here by saying it really fits in with the tone and vision that Matt Reeves has for this Gotham. So personally, I really wouldn't mind it, because also I know that there'd be other little bits and bobs going on with other villainous characters in the background. I'm sure Penguin will be up to something. Maybe even other characters introduced. For example, maybe even as House Header said here, if we get the Arkham series and Scarecrow is saved till the third film, of which we would have had the Arkham series by then, maybe Hugo is involved somehow. Maybe Crane started, as I mentioned in the last week's video, in Arkham as a psychologist experimenting with his fear toxin. I don't know, I just wanted to include this one because I wanted to once again in this video, since this is, you know, a lot of these questions and theories are taken from the previous one, so it's like a nice chain and link to the previous video, leave the floor open to you. Would you like Scarecrow Jonathan Crane to take center stage as the main villain in one of the possibly 2 upcoming movies, because I want to just set the precedent there of restricting this hypothetically to 3 movies, because it makes it that much more of an interesting decision to make for you guys in the comments, because you have to factor in, out of all of the Rogues Gallery members out there, all of the lesser characters that maybe some of you want to see finally take the center stage, would you like one of the more popular villains like Scarecrow to take priority over one of those characters again? Or would you be like, no, I don't really want that, I want one of these other characters to take center stage, maybe like Jervis Tetch, even though he's quite a popular character, we haven't seen him prominent unless it's the video games in that of a live action Batman movie. We did have Jervis Tetch in Gotham. That was pretty awesome. The storyline got a bit bland eventually, but the actor and the portrayal was really, really good. So to see that in a Batman movie, maybe some of you prefer that over Scarecrow. Let me know your responses down below. Personally, as I always say, it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but whoever Matt Reeves chooses, whether that's one of the more popular characters in the Rogues Gallery, such as, you know, the Scarecrow, or if it's a lesser known villain, I will be happy either way, because I love all the Batman villains, and sure, I might have a preference here and there, but I ultimately feel comfortable in whatever characters Mattson Tomlin and Matt Reeves choose to write for the second movie or the third movie. So next up is from Kalerion, and this is a response to, in the last week's video, somebody asked me about what time is the Batman set in, and I basically ultimately said modern time, but I couldn't be sure if it was, you know, 2021 or like this say 2019, even though I'm pretty sure it was meant to be present day. But one of you guys, well, a few of you actually commented this, in addition to Kalerion, sorry if I'm butchering your username there, that you can actually figure it out. So he says, we know from Bruce's voiceover that the movie begins on Thursday, October 31st. October 31st falls on a Thursday in 2019, but that doesn't happen again until 2024. Also, there's a set photo that shows a close-up of a taxicab medallion that was dated 2019. So that pretty much is your answer for those of you who want the precise date. I can't really disagree with that, because that's pretty smart. I should have thought of that with regards to what year was the day Thursday on October 31st, and that was indeed 2019. Makes sense, around the time Matt Reeves was probably writing the script and coming to production and whatnot, even though it was meant to be released in 2021. At that time, if it was released 2019, isn't like, oh, you know, why are you saying it all the way back then? It wasn't that long ago. So ultimately, yeah, I agree. October 31st, Thursday, is 2019, and I believe it's that date. I don't believe it's the 2024 date, which would be the next Thursday, October 31st. So yeah, the Batman 1 takes place in 2019, and it makes you think. It makes you think, when is Chapter 2 going to be set canonically? I mean, this goes back to that whole discussion we've had many times now of how much of a time jump will there be. Will it just be to 2021, 2022, or are they going to go further to like Batman Year 5, Year 6, or whatever? I think it will be in between Batman Year 2 and Year 5, so it could be around 2022, 2023, but let me know your responses down in the comments. Now up next is from Jay, and I found this one fairly interesting, and it's about the cape. So my only problem with the suit is how short the cape is compared to Bale's and Batfleck's. I always wanted to see Batman's cape cover his suit while he walks around doing detective work like the 2004 animated series. Now, again, that's perfectly valid. Everyone's opinion is different, their perspective, their preferences, it's all subjective. Now, the reason why I found it interesting is because for me, I really like the length of the cape. I understand and I like both visions, like what you said about Bale's and Batfleck's. But I think with why, you know, for example, maybe with this clip that you're seeing when Gordon and Bruce go down to the mayor's garage where he's got all of those cars there and they find the thumb drive, you get a good shot of how, you know, the cape goes above or around about his boot level rather than touching the floor. I think it's done from more of a practical standpoint. And I know some people might be like, oh, but I don't really care about that. You know, this is a Batman movie. We may as well chuck in the unrealistic longer cape in there to make it look cooler. But to me, this still looks cool or cooler. From a practical standpoint, is probably the method behind why it's as long as it is or as short as it is for some people out there. And that is, if you have a cape going behind you at all times, it is, how do I put this, like a bit of a trip hazard, so to speak. So having it around about there is nice, and I like it. I like how you can see the little crevices in the bottom of the cape because it's elevated slightly above the ground level. But I also completely understand, as I said, oh, how cool is it when the cape is just, flowing on the floor. There's not really too much to say about this other than I really dig it. Maybe I'm biased here because this is my favorite Batsuit, but whilst I'm speaking about this, I wanted to chuck in another comment here because, again, it's just interesting, everyone's different opinions and preferences, and the next one is the cowl. And this one's from Brock Gorang, and the reason why I'm choosing this is because I'm sure many people will agree and also many people will disagree. So if they change anything, change the cowl. It's not terrible, but it's the weakest part of the design. Now, very interestingly here, when I remember seeing that DC Fandom 2020 trailer, man, that takes me back. And I know I keep going off subject here, but I have to say, can you imagine the next time we get the sizzle reel trailer from that of the 2020's DC Fandom for the first film, but for the second film? Oh my god, because we know, and I just got chills, by the way, on my shoulders and my neck, because we know that was only 25 to 35% shot, as Matt Reeves boasted, yet they managed to put all that together with Nirvana's Something in the Way. Oh my god. But anyway, I need to control myself. So the reason why I kind of brought that back up is because when I saw the suit, I was like, oh man, but I was also, like a lot of people, thinking, okay, the cowl. I was completely on board with Robert Pattinson. I mostly loved the suit, yet the cowl was a bit jarring. I think because I'd been conditioned to mostly see chin straps on Batman quite a lot, I wasn't debating the fact that Pattinson had a strong jawline, and I even digged it, but was it my preference? I don't necessarily think it was at the time. Also, I couldn't really understand why the cowl was mega leathery. I did at the same time because they're likely going for early Batman, even though it has a plating underneath it to protect from bullets. I mean, for crying out loud, he got shot in the head a few times in the movie. There's literal circular indents for bullet shots on the cowl. But I still thought, okay, they're probably going for an earlier-esque look. As the movies unfold, they'll give it more of maybe a shell type texture to it. But honestly, as time moved onwards, and it didn't take very long at all, especially as we got more angles of the suit, and even from the get-go, for example, I remember that one shot in the rain as he's standing over looking at Penguin's operation right before the Batmobile chase. That was one of my favorite shots from the movie. I took so many thumbnails of that particular shot because that solidified for me is I love the cowl shape. I just wasn't always on board with the material. But long story short, I really love the cowl. I really, really do. The more time that went by, its shape really complements Pattinson's face. It's very Zorro-y in a way as well with the leather, and I understand, as I've already went over, the reason behind that. I have no doubt, as per Brock's comment here, that if they change anything, it will likely change as the Batsuit gets subtly upgraded. Again, I'm still quite reserved for how much of an upgrade we will get. I don't think it will deviate too far from the current design, but innovate, as I always say, like how we got into last week with Jackson Durr's suit upgrade design. That was a really good example of keeping it the same, but maybe with some differences. Now, I do think the cowl texture or material will be one of those, but I don't think it was the weakest part of the design, to be honest. But that's just my opinion. But I think it was important to stress how I didn't dislike it, but at the beginning, I was like, okay, that's how I felt at the beginning. Now, I would also love for you guys to comment if you had a similar experience to me, but also let me know if you really dislike it and what you would want to see in a second movie's Batman cowl. I know many of you want a chin strap. I know many of you want white eyes over the lenses of the cowl. Personally, I don't want that. Long story short, the emotion portrayed by Pattinson and the ability to show the eyes just offers so much more insight into Batman. Not that I disagree that facial expressions can't also do the same thing with white lenses attached to the cowl, just like in many comics, many animated movies. It's just a preference of mine, again, to see the eyes of Bruce behind the cowl. But do you agree with Brock here that it is the weakest part of the design? So ultimately, in conclusion, I love the cowl. The only changes I would make is to show a progression of Batman's evolution, change the material up a little bit. I still don't think it needs a chin strap. Just maybe make it, I don't know, just a little bit more solid rather than leather. Not dissing the leather look at all, though, because there's just something that's so grounded and homemade about this suit that I deeply, deeply love. But again, let me know your thoughts here on Brock's comment. So up next from Mr. Churchy, he says, I think with the Arkham series, having one of either Crane or Strange working there and the others having a cameo mention maybe, and then the series ending with something like Harleen having a job interview or her first session with Joker, my best bet would be Crane as well though. So this is going back to what we said last week with the Arkham series discussion. There was quite a few questions and discussion about that. Also going back to the question in this video, a lot of people seem to think Crane would fit very well with the Arkham series. So again, off the floor to you, do you agree with that? But what I like about this is something I didn't really consider. We have spoken about Harleen before in the Arkham series because we know that Barry Keoghan's Joker was put away during Batman Year One. He was a killer that Batman put away. If not, maybe his first proper Rogues Gallery member he put away, and the second being that of Edward Nashton, the Riddler. Now, with Joker not even having the moniker or title of Joker yet in this universe, it does make you think, well, Harleen, as per super traditionalist canon, does have to come in at some point. I'm all about innovation and adaptations, but I don't think Matt Reeves wouldn't really not have some kind of psychiatrist involved there. Now, that doesn't mean he has to do a shite ton of screen time with her in one of the movies or anything like that, but if, and only if, we are to see Barry's Joker in the Arkham series, it would be really cool to maybe not feature him too much, and I have no issue waiting to see Barry again for another couple of movies in this trilogy, whether he has a larger role in the third movie rather than that of the second movie. I don't mind. I don't mind waiting for Joker, but I would like to see him pop up in the movie again, possibly in an Arkham Breakout. But here, if you're doing an Arkham series, which is for sure going to come out before the third installment, I've always said that it could facilitate a Riddler and Joker breakout, but if you end the Arkham series maybe with him not breaking out or whatever, but end it with Harleen coming in and talking to Joker, getting an interview to become the Arkham or one of Arkham's psychologists, and she's assigned to Joker. And it's a similar kind of ending to the Batman movie when Joker says hi to Riddler and calls him his friend and whatnot. It could just be like, hi, I'm your new psychologist. Obviously, this is awful dialogue right now. And Barry's just like, nice to meet you or something. Or I don't know. Or like, this is the beginning of a wonderful friendship. Some kind of hint like that could then set up the fact that we've got the second movie to go, the third movie to go. We know in the interim, behind the scenes the whole time, Joker, even though he hasn't got the name Joker yet, is having all of these discussions or mad love story-esque developing with Harleen at Arkham Asylum to maybe be visited upon in one of the main movies one day. So again, let me know your thoughts on Harleen's involvement in this universe, if at all we ever get to see her. I do think we will see Barry Keoghan's Joker at some point. It's just impossible to think where Matt Reeves is going to apply it. But that is just an example of how it could be done. I like Churchy's suggestion there. So up next is from Damien Ristori saying, superb content as always. Thank you, man. My most wanted, and I really hope Reeves adds his presence to him, is none other than Jervis Tetch. Have him not quite Mad Hatter, but see him built up. He's my favorite Batman villain, but also deserves a proper role, not just a throwaway character. So this brings me back to what villains are we going to see, but also what caliber, and maybe lesser popular villains with regards to how much or how little they've been featured in big Batman projects like this Batman trilogy under Matt Reeves. Now, Mad Hatter is an interesting one because this world is fairly grounded, and Mad Hatter isn't exactly like a crazy-ass metahuman. He's like a neuroscientist who develops technology, if you will, these gadgets which can hypnotize people, mesmerize them. And I was thinking that could pretty much work in this movie. It's just, you can't have like a little whammying ray like the 60s Batman, Adam West kind of style popping out the hat. I don't think it would be as science fiction-y as that, so to speak. Yeah, I do think there might be some kind of, they could stretch it to a device that somehow resonates on a frequency maybe that Mad Hatter has been designing, and I think that would work. So it was just interesting to consider here because I've always been unsure about Mad Hatter in one of these movies. Even though I think it would be a great involvement, I was just trying to really figure out, okay, technology doesn't technically exist. Like, you can't buy something off Amazon right now and whammy people, right? But there are certain things with regards to how sounds, frequencies affect the human brain. For example, something that came up recently is in Westworld, one of the showrunners said something that made me think of Mad Hatter, with how if people sing in a church and listen to the church organ, it instills a state of euphoria in the human mind. So there is, resonance there with frequencies. So they could stretch it to things like, well, what if Mad Hatter somehow modifies some kind of device and affects people that way? I'm just more interested into how Matt Reeves would ground a realistic piece of technology, or as realistic as can be, into hypnotizing people in that of his grounded universe. Now, the Riddler was a very grounded yet also faithful adaptation, and Paul Dano was brilliant. He did all the riddles. He was a killer at the same time. It was based on the Zodiac killer in a certain way. So when you think of that in other villains, we've got Joker. He's been put away, hasn't been labeled or got the moniker as Joker as we know, yet he's a crazy clown basically, and he was murdering people. So you have to apply that to other people. Mad Hatter would be early on, and I suppose he'd be experimenting with some technology. He would probably be very obsessed with Alice in Wonderland, and that's where he gets his moniker from. That's probably how he poises himself up in Gotham. But what would his plot exactly be? I can't imagine he's going to be obsessed with getting hats or Batman's cowl, because that's pretty straightforward. Like, I want to take down a Batman and mount his cowl on my little collection there. I feel like Matt Reeves would write quite a personal story, because with him, for example, the first movie, it all comes back to trauma, how that diverges out between multiple characters. This applies to Selina. Her trauma led her down the somewhat anti-hero path. Penguin has his own trauma that led him down that path. Batman has his trauma, and that led him down the vigilante path. And then with Riddler, a similar vigilante path, but one that is through much more of a harsher lens, and something of which a method Batman wouldn't do himself, and that is murdering people to achieve the change, albeit that Riddler has a little bit more of a crazy-ass side and eccentric side. So Mad Hatter, there would have to be some kind of personal story or kind of aspect to the foundation of why he wants to hypnotize people. I mean, let me rephrase it. It doesn't have to be that way. It's not a requirement. I just feel like Matt Reeves always wants to add, even to his villains, some kind of reasoning there for what they're doing, even bordering on empathy in terms of how the audience can understand why or what they're doing, but not necessarily obviously condone the action. So how would you feel about Mad Hatter Jervis Tetch being one of the villains? Because this is a perfect example of how we could get someone like him, and for once it's not Bane, and for once it's not Joker, or someone really, really popular, or Scarecrow. How about the freaking Mad Hatter for the Batman Chapter 2 or Chapter 3? It's not Mr. Freeze, one of the most obvious and popular choices that fans refer to for one of the main trilogy villains. Let's just assume, hypothetically, that Jervis Tetch is the main villain for the Batman Chapter 2. What story and reasoning behind Jervis Tetch, the Mad Hatter, would you guys give him for the main plot of the Batman? Why would he be trying to do this? Induce people in these hypnotic states? It would be crazy, and there's so many things I can envision. Like, for example, Gotham did this really one good episode where Jervis Tetch got lots of people of Gotham to stand up on the edge of building tops, which is insane, because, how are you meant to solve that when so many people are right on the brink of stepping off and falling to their death? So can you imagine a plot where it culminates up in the Batman with Robert Pattinson in the second or third movie, where he has to try and prevent some crazy similar situation like into that of where you got so many citizens of Gotham standing right on the edge of buildings? Obviously it won't be that, but something of that scale and scope. Yet you have to figure out, how do I interrupt this? How do I break them out of it? They're not responding. Yet I want people to think of a personal drive for Mad Hatter as well, beyond that of, hey, I'm crazy and I just want to hypnotize people. One storyline, if not grand, could be that he is in love with someone called Alice, or maybe he lost someone close to him called Alice, and since, he's mad, as in the Mad Hatter, again, this would go more along the serial killing route, but he keeps trying to recreate that memory through finding other people who look like Alice or hypnotizing them. So the thing about this is, as much as I love the idea of Professor Pig, or this Mad Hatter storyline where Batman has to try and figure out the next Alice target, people who look the same, and he's using his detective skills to find age groups or the next likely victims or whatnot. The thing is, each and every movie then would be a very prolific, need to try and stop the next serial killer. And whilst I love the Riddler one, and whilst I'd love Batman, like 20 movies to be like, okay, let's try and stop Professor Pig from serial killing, let's try and stop Mad Hatter from finding the next Alice victim. I can't, my intuition is telling me that not every single movie is going to be another Seven-like investigation, another murder mystery preventing or trying to figure out who the next victim is. So all while I love the idea of Mad Hatter trying to, do something like that, and Batman having to stop him, and it's a race against time in certain murders, it also is bit too similar, even though the plots are completely different in its core of murder. So what I want to see, as per my top 10 wants, in the Batman sequel, is whether whatever villain it is, they do need to break the mold a little bit, because no matter how awesome the second movie may be, if there is a similar murder mystery, a preventing the next murder kind of thing, or whatever, even if it's with a completely different character, uses completely different methods, with even a different reasoning behind it, reviews and critics would say, yeah, like, it was awesome, but we also had the Riddler going around killing people and stuff like that. So I can't imagine each movie's going to be a murder mystery. So let me know your wants and reasons behind Jervis Tetch and the Mad Hatter, and what his main goal and plot would be in Gotham, whilst also bearing in mind that he likely wouldn't even have the Mad Hatter name yet, but that might be given to him throughout the movie from the Gotham News or something like that. So Testable Racer asks something that I think I've spoken about before, but again, as I said at the beginning of this video, this is in direct discussion to what we talked about in last week's video. It brought up the whole discussion of the Joker, the relevancy of his look, although it may not be a preference of yours, because maybe you might not like Barry Keoghan's Joker. Testable Racer asks, I'm just curious, since the Joker scene was technically a deleted scene and not part of the film, does anybody think maybe Matt Reeves might change the look of the Joker? I don't mind his design at all, but I'm just curious if maybe he ends up changing it, and since it was a deleted scene, maybe he makes it not canon to this universe of the Batman. So this ultimately brings up the fact that the only canonical scene that we have, technically speaking, of Barry Keoghan's Joker is behind a very obscure Arkham cell, where, if you turn the brightness up and stuff, even if you don't actually, you can see the cuts on the side of his face, the extended stuck smile. For the second movie, could the design be changed? I think ultimately here, and obviously I don't know Matt Reeves personally, he hasn't told me this, but I think he will stick with his integrity and choice on this one and keep the design, not discounting, though, that there might be subtle changes. I do think that this Joker will have a congenital disease through and through. Matt Reeves will not change his mind on that. He's talked about it in interviews. He's talked about the design and inspiration in the director's commentary to many trades after the movie came out. So no matter what, Barry Keoghan's Joker's got to have a congenital disease that gives him that smile and, skin look. But I wouldn't rule out some subtle changes as of when or if we see Barry Keoghan's Joker again. For example, they could easily make a subtle change that doesn't compromise Matt Reeves' vision that he had with regards to this congenital disease and whatnot. For example, through giving him a bit more hair or something like that. Maybe making a little bit less flakiness on the skin, yet still having that horrific smile that's stuck up here. But I do think it will largely stay the same. And that is ultimately because of what I've said. He's got conviction in his vision. He's stated congenital disease. He's stated that when people look at him, they get very uncomfortable, and he's learned to use that as a bit of like a weapon. He knows that people view his face as very disturbing, and so throughout growing up in his life, he's used that opportunity as a tool to get into people's head. Like, if people are kind of even scared to look at you, you can like double down on that, get used to it, and just look at them right back. You can use that as some kind of intimidation and kind of power over them in a certain way. It just adds a very haunting and compelling aspect to this Joker character. But either way, all I would say is it's the equivalent of having, I don't know, a color change on your character in the video game. Nothing that changes the armor too much or anything like that. You've still got the main block of color there, but the color too, the gilding, maybe changed up a little bit. So maybe a little bit more hair, maybe the eyebrows could be more prominent in the second or third movie or Arkham series if they decide to bring him back. But as for like the congenital disease, which is ultimately what gives him his defining look as the Joker, I don't see that changing. Okay, guys, so I'm going to make this next brief question the last one for this installment whilst I'm away. I hope you enjoyed the bonus discussion series video. The next one should be in a few weeks' time. By the way, so Sun Unbeknown TV says, people don't think they can definitely do all white contact lenses. That would make the most perfect sense. Also, it will still record what he sees like the first movie. So I don't know if that was like a misunderstanding from my last video talking about the white lenses on Jackson Durr's Batman concept art for a possible sequel soon, because it had the white eyes and I spoke about how, you know, they could do that but it might not do it. I wasn't saying that they can't do it. It's more of a question of if they should. Now, this is a very similar discussion to what I was saying earlier, where many of you may agree with the cowl, many of you may not agree with the cowl of the first movie, maybe you don't mind it. Now, as for the white eyes, it's a very similar thing. So many people grew up with Batman having white eyes, video games, comics, animations, you name it. Yet in live action, they mostly go with showing the eyes. And that is something I do ultimately lean on that side of the fence. More or less just because I do have a lot of conviction in when I say that showing the eyes, I mean, just watch the movie again, is cool. Trust me. As cool as having white eyes and Robert Pattinson in every scene of that movie would have been badass, having it without offers a whole layer of emotion for me. You can see when his eyes well up. You can see when they like narrow like this. In a movie, yes, there's modern comic book movies that now have this kind of CGI, you know, for example, Moon Knight or Deadpool or something like that, that when their eyes, they have white eyes narrow or like they blink, it happens there as well. But I just don't think that would fit as well on this Batman. It could still work and it would still be really cool, but I just don't think it would ever be as preferable for me as seeing Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne / Batman real eye color and eyeballs, if you will, behind the cowl. There's just so much more conveyed there, the way he might look at Selina, the way he reacts to Gordon, the way he talks, the way it even adds to his demeanor. If you just have the white eyes stuck there, which is one possibility, or maybe they go the extra mile and they add, you know, the narrowing like in the Batman the Animated Series or something like that, which is something I don't know if they would do, but they could do it. It's just not as crucial to conveying the attitude and demeanor of a live action take when you show that of the expression of the eyes. And I know I keep repeating myself and when I'm saying, yes, you have facial expressions, you have the whole movement of body language. I'm really not discounting that, because some people say, yeah, but Boba, like, you know, the way you hold yourself, the way you move, the way Batman might physically express himself in his mouth and his, you know, micro muscles in his face. Yes, I know, but I still think that eyes, as in eyeballs and irises and eye everything, take up like 60+% of that. So again, I completely understand why you might favor white eyes, to viewer watching me right now, or those who are with me saying, oh, I love white eyes just like I do. But yeah, for the Batman movies, Pattinson should just use his eyes under the cowl. But that is my response to it. So this last question in this Q&A discussion series video is, I leave the floor open to you once again. With that in mind, honestly, take into account, maybe watch the movie again, maybe watch a clip, and envision white eyes, but also obviously how it is as well without the white eyes. And then make your decision. Do you want white eyes? Do you think it could add a certain level of cool, but as I say, maybe take away from some other aspects? Or do you completely disagree with me and think, no, like I think it would be badass, but also still maintain just as much acting, emotional portrayal and demeanor as if you had it without the white eyes, which I really don't know if that would be achieved as well. But that just about ends this video, guys. So let me know your thoughts on everything that we discussed today. The hashtag for today's video, if you got this far, post with whatever your comment is going to be down in the comments. Hashtag behind the mask. Leave this video a like if you did enjoy it. It really helps promote these videos into the algorithm. So thank you so much if you've done that. It's very helpful. Do consider subscribing. Double check if you're subscribed, because a lot of you think you are when you're not. So check that red button before you leave today's video. And that's everything other than the links in the description down below. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family members in the next video. Goodbye.